Hey everyone, in this module I'll be going over surveying equipment and discuss surveying techniques. All the information provided in this module we will be going over during our hands-on training at a later time. I'm sure during that time this will all make a lot more sense. So the main piece of equipment used during a radiological monitoring is the Ludlam 3 meter. The Ludlam 3s are an easy way to monitor for radiation contamination. In order to use the Ludlam, you must first put the monitor together. This will be a lot easier to understand once we have our hands-on training, but I'm going to try to walk you through the process step by step. So to begin, make sure that your range selector switch is turned off. The range selector switch is located underneath the handle. When the switch is turned off, connect your pancake probe to the monitor with the connecting cable. The connecting cable should be locked into place before you use it. You can check this by pulling on the cable and ensuring that it does not come loose. If it does, just twist the cable connections to make sure it's locked into place. Next, open the battery lid. The battery lid is located underneath that handle. It is not the latches on the ends of the monitor. Do not open those. The battery slot is always going to be located underneath the handle and it'll have a silver twist knob. You will then install the batteries. Make sure that the batteries match with the plus or minus symbols located on that top inside of the battery lid. Then close the lid and twist the knob to make sure it's locked. Once you've done this, change the range selector switch to BAT. This is the battery test function. When the knob is in this position, the needle should move on the scale and move all the way to the right and fall somewhere between that BAT test range. If the batteries are bad, you're going to want to change those out. If they're good, you can remove the protective cover on your pancake probe. You will want to make sure that the AUD or audio switch is turned on and the FS switch is on F for fast. To begin the operability check test, you're going to turn that range selector switch to times 100. So to do the operability check, you will need to open the check source door on the side of the monitor. This is that little yellow door on the side. There's a small radioactive source behind the door that you can use to ensure that the monitor is working correctly. So after you open that door, place the mesh side of the probe against the source. The monitor should begin to chirp rapidly. Next you will need to change that range selector switch to times 10 and place the probe back over that check source. The meter should read somewhere between that plus or minus 20% of the reading indicated on the calibration label that's on the side of your monitor. It should be next to that radiological source door. If the monitor is working correctly and is calibrated into the correct range, you can close the check source door, press the reset button, and then turn the range selector switch to times 0.1. At this point, your Ludlam 3 monitor is ready to use. Okay, so knowing how to read the Ludlam monitor scale correctly is probably the most difficult part of using this monitor. The first thing to know is that the Ludlam measures in counts per minute, or CPM for short. The scale on the meter is between 0K and 5K, as you can see. So 5 is going to be 5,000. Each tick mark is 100. So when monitoring, you will have to do some math depending on where the range selector switch is set. So take, for example, the needle is on 3K. If that's true, then if the switch is on times 0.1, then the actual reading is going to be 300 counts per minute. If the range selector switch is on times 1, the reading will be on 3,000. For times 10, it's going to be 30,000, times 100, 300,000. Moving on to some of the surveying techniques. When you're setting up your Ludlam monitor, it's a good idea to make sure that you cover the probe in some sort of thin plastic, such as a plastic wrap or a little plastic baggie. This will help protect the probe from becoming contaminated if it accidentally touches a contaminated individual. As I said earlier, it's a good idea to keep the audio in the on position. Being able to hear those clicks will help you know when you're getting closer to a contaminated section. After you perform those operability checks on your monitor, remember to take a background reading before you begin monitoring any individuals. By taking that background reading, you're able to get a baseline of how much radiation is in the background of the area that you're working. So if you have a lot of contaminated people going through your area, then you'll want to check the background again periodically to make sure that the room isn't becoming more contaminated. When you're ready to begin monitoring, make sure that your monitor is set on the most sensitive setting and on the fast mode. That's that FS switch that I mentioned a few slides back. When you're getting close to a contaminated area while monitoring someone, you may want to change it to the slow mode, as well as decrease the sensitivity in order to pinpoint the area and receive an accurate reading. In order to monitor properly, you will need to move the probe no closer than 1 inch, but no further than 3 inches away from the skin. Again, try not to touch the probe to someone's skin. You don't want to get it contaminated. While surveying, you want to go So when surveying, you want to make sure that you're moving the probe no faster than 6 inches per second. For each person you are monitoring, there will be a radiological monitoring form that will be filled out that goes along with them through the whole process. On that form, record all the contamination levels for that person and where the contamination areas are located. Sometimes your probe may become contaminated. If you pull the probe away from someone and the rhythm continues to beep, that could be a sign that it has some contamination on it. When this happens, you're going to want to swap out the plastic covering that you've placed around it. Also, like I mentioned before, make sure that you're periodically checking the background to ensure that there isn't an increase of contamination in that area. So when you're monitoring someone, you will have them stand in front of you with their arms and legs slightly extended. They should look something like the person in the picture on the screen. You will begin to focus on the head, concentrating on the mouth, nose, and ears to ensure that there's no internal contamination. If those places are contaminated, then they may have internal contamination. Once you have surveyed the head, you're going to slowly move in a zigzag motion over the rest of their body. When you get to the hands, you're going to want to monitor the top of their hands and then ask them to turn their hands over. That way you do not place the probe underneath their hands. When that happens, some particles could fall off the body and fall onto the probe, contaminating it. You're going to then continue to the legs and the top of the feet. When you've completed the front of the body, have them turn around and use that same zigzag motion to monitor the back of their body. When you get to their feet, you're going to want to ask them to lift up each foot so you can monitor the bottom of their feet. If for some reason that time does not permit you to monitor their entire body, make sure that you're at least checking the head, hands, and feet. More than likely, if those areas are contaminated, the rest of their body may be contaminated as well. The same goes for if they're not contaminated. You may be asked to monitor vehicles for contamination. If so, it's kind of similar to monitoring a person. You will instruct the occupants to roll up their windows and then turn off the ventilation system. At that point, you will want to monitor the front of the vehicle using the same type of zigzag motion. Then move to the side and make sure you're concentrating on areas that the occupants could have touched, such as the door handle, and then the areas of contact on the vehicle that could have contacted the ground, like the wheels. When monitoring the wheel wells, be sure not to touch the probe to the vehicle. Again, you don't want to knock off any particles that could contaminate that probe. Surveying the back and other sides of the vehicles in the same manner. Once you are done, ask the occupants to exit the vehicle and monitor the interior of the vehicle, as well as the engine compartment. You're going to want to focus on the air intake system there. If the vehicle is wet, try to avoid getting any water on your probe, as that water could be contaminated. So there's a chance that you may be asked to survey some equipment as well. Monitoring equipment is the same process as everything else we just discussed. You'll want to make sure that all equipment is removed from the vehicles and then begin using that same zigzag motion to monitor. Again, try not to place the probe underneath anything. If the object cannot be turned over, then just be careful when you're monitoring under the object. When there may be sensitive items, such as weapons, you want to make sure that you are you're maintaining a chain of custody form that will be sent along with this item through the monitoring and decontamination process. And that concludes our surveying equipment and monitoring module. If you have any questions or have some follow-up concerns, just give me a call at the number listed on the screen.